25-question quiz in front of me that I had not even touched, and whatever book we were supposed to read to study that quiz, I had no recollection of. Even better, that same moment my teacher decided to say, okay guys, we have 30 seconds left for the quiz. Let's just say it was not a very good quiz experience for me, but in that moment, I'm pretty sure it makes sense that I was sleep deprived. And sleep deprivation is exactly what it sounds like. You're depriving yourself of the essential sleep that you need to grow as a person, for your mind and for your body. This is exactly what I looked like at that moment, by the way. Now, sleep deprivation, obviously, the short-term effects are, you're going to mess up a quiz or two like I did, but scientists have realized in the long run that sleep deprivation is actually really important for growth, and not having enough sleep is not going to allow you to grow in any sort of way, mental, physical, any kind of way.
I want to understand exactly how sleep deprived were the students at my high school. I knew myself to be very sleep deprived, but after hearing accounts from others saying that, oh, I only got 2 hours of sleep last night, but I'm still functioning, I want to see exactly how bad was it. So I conducted a little research project of my own, a high school survey. My survey had 25 questions in 3 sections. First section was about general sleep habits. Second section talked about students' sleep deprivation symptoms, which I'll go into a little bit. And third section talked about students' lifestyle, kind of asking about their course loads, extracurricular activities, their screen time overall. It was pretty successful. I had 105 responses, which is like a 95% confidence rate out of a population of 3,440 students at Doherty Valley High School. Very first question was obviously, are you generally sleep deprived? And around, if you look at this graph over here, 50% of the students at the school said that they were sleep deprived, and only a quarter said they were not. But I wanted to test, was this actually true? Because obviously a survey is pretty easy to lie on, which is why I moved on to my next section, which was about sleep deprivation symptoms. Here are some of the symptoms that I researched about from the CDC, Healthline, National Library of Medicine, were common symptoms that people who had sleep deprivation exhibited. And then I asked students if they exhibited each of these symptoms. They never had them, they had them rarely, sometimes, or often. And then I made a scale based on the number of often responses they had. So this is my little graph over here, and I have 4 sections. Red is like extreme sleep deprivation, orange is severe, light green is moderate, and dark green is no to mild sleep deprivation. Obviously, you can see the number of often responses varied for each group. 0 often responses were for no, 1 to 2 for moderate, and 3 to 4 were severe, and 5 to 10 were extreme. Luckily, there was only 11% of my sample that said they were extremely sleep deprived. But if you're counting all of the people that said they were sleep deprived, that are going to be sleep deprivation that's detrimental to one's health, that came to around 80%. 80% of the students were actually sleep deprived, rather than the 50% that said they were. This, to me, kind of showed me kind of the students that already have kind of a misinformed understanding of sleep deprivation, how it's really reflected in one's physical health. Now let's go into a little bit of neuroscience and talk about exactly what sleep deprivation does to our growth. This is your brain. Well, not really your brain, it's not purple, it's last time I checked. But this is your brain, and the brain is made up of brain cells called neurons. And we have 3 basic kinds of neurons. We have motor neurons, which obviously control our muscles. We have sensory neurons, which control the visual, auditory, all our senses stimuli. And finally, we have interneurons, which work inside the nervous system. Now, each of these neurons have kind of the main role of transmission. So the synapse over here is kind of a connection between one end of one neuron and the kind of beginning part of the other neuron. And this is how signals are transmitted, throughout the entire brain, allowing us to do complex tasks from like learning calculus to going skydiving. Without this transmission, your brain is not able to kind of, I guess, talk to each other and make all of these sorts of complex tasks. So obviously, sleep deprivation, if you want to know, first thing is that sleep deprivation is going to cause neurons to malfunction, effectively hindering this process. But let's first talk about what is your brain doing as you sleep. So around the brain, we have this fluid called cerebrospinal fluid. It's kind of like a watery-like fluid, and this is kind of the main process that works with our brain's lymphatic system, the system that clears water in the brain. What happens when you're sleeping is that actually the space between your neurons, or the space between other blood vessels, kind of increases by at least 60%, so that the cerebrospinal fluid is allowed to kind of wash away any kind of toxins that might build up in the brain. One toxin in particular that's been known in the past couple of years is called beta amyloid. And people that have Alzheimer's disease are shown to have an accumulated amount of beta amyloid cells. So clearly, clearly the people that are sleep deprived who don't get this chance to kind of flush out their toxins are going to have these toxins accumulate at some point, which can lead to these kinds of diseases. Another thing, neurogenesis is a process that happens a lot during sleep, which is the formation of new neurons. And this is important for two reasons. First, obviously having more neurons is better. Compare your judgment skills from when you were a 5-year-old to probably now. You're probably going to see that your judgment skills are much better because obviously through brain development, more neurons have been forming. Second reason is that, like I just said, so more neurons form kind of in your development stage from an infancy, child to adolescence, and that kind of stops kind of once you get to adulthood because of development stages. So that means if your neurons are damaged once you reach adulthood, you can't regenerate them. It means you're going to be having a loss of brain cells from processes like sleep deprivation. You won't be able to remake those neurons or do any sort of higher level thinking. Another thing that scientists were trying to figure out and study was the connection between sleep and stress. So they looked at rats and looked at non-sleep deprived rats versus sleep deprived rats. So non-sleep deprived rats who had rats sleep for them recommended number of hours, they had no stress response overall, and that led them to having no sorts of biological problems. Because of that, again, if you have no kind of problems, you're going to have like a nice, normal, relaxing sleep. And again, they're not going to have any other stress responses, and then that leads them to having even more no problems. Notice how each of the arrows are kind of leading the next step in like a cycle, which we call a positive feedback loop, because your response is getting intensified each time you go through the cycle. In this case, this is good. It is promoting a process called homeostasis, which is kind of the steady internal environment in the body. Now, in sleep-deprived rats, this was kind of messed up. Rats had disrupted sleep that caused them to have an activated HPA axis. HPA stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and that activates our body's stress response and sympathetic nervous system, causing symptoms like elevated heart rate or even like a release of lots of hormones. And that caused them to have many kinds of biological problems. I can tell you that increased heart rate is going to lead to having cardiovascular disease. Obviously, someone that's going to be sick isn't going to have a nice amount of sleep, right? So they're going to have more disrupted sleep, they're going to have more stress response activated, and even more problems. So here we have a positive feedback loop, but that is intensifying the small disruption, like the disruption of sleep, leading to no homeostasis. Now, I talked about a lot of the biological perspective, what's happening in the brain when you don't sleep, but how does this kind of get reflected in things like daily life? Students' main goal, teens' main goal is to be a more successful student. And obviously sleep deprivation hinders that. If you remember my little situation, I kind of forgot everything I learned when I saw that quiz for the first time, because sleep is very important for memory. Part of the brain that this talks about memory is called our hippocampus. And another experiment done by the American Chemistry Society was looking at mice with normal sleep and sleep-deprived mice, and looking at their hippocampus in particular. What they found out was that when they were making mice do cognitive tasks like going through a maze, they saw that mice that had a normal amount of sleep had a normal amount of this protein called PTN, and also the size of their hippocampus was normal. But sleep-deprived mice, on the other hand, had a less amount of PTN, and therefore their hippocampus also seemed to look a little bit smaller. And the scientists realized that's because having a lack of PTN actually kills the cells in the hippocampus. Now think about this. If you have a smaller hippocampus, obviously you're not going to be able to remember a lot of information. So that is quite detrimental. Another thing that's going to take care of the cognitive ability is the types of sleep. So in our sleep cycle, we go through two kinds of sleep. We go through NREM and REM sleep. NREM is kind of like a less intense kind of sleep, is when it's the very beginning and you're easily able to wake up if someone tries to wake you up when you're sleeping. And that has been linked, NREM sleep has been linked to declarative memory, like memorizing facts and statistics. While REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, is kind of one of your deeper sleep stages where you have the most vivid kinds of dreams, and that's linked to procedural memory, remembering how to do things in a certain order. REM sleep is also linked to an important thing called reaction time. Think about a driver driving around, and suddenly a passenger just zip past them. Obviously, a good driver who's alert is going to be able to, put the brakes on time. However, a driver that may be sleep deprived may not be able to do so quickly because if they're sleep deprived, they're losing out on REM sleep, whose goal is to make sure neurons are excited enough so that they're able to respond to stimuli like that person sitting passed through. Now, obviously, all the stuff I've been talking about is sleep deprivation is bad, but one thing I want to leave you with this presentation is that you are in control of your own sleep, and my survey did prove that. My last section that talked about lifestyle activities of students was trying to figure out kind of the reasons for sleep deprivation, and I found two of them. First was obviously class loads. If you take a look at this graph over here, on the on the y-axis I have the number of AP and honor classes put into groups of 0, 1 to 2, 3 to 4, and 4 plus. And at the bottom I have the student count, which is basically their answer to the question that are you sleep deprived? If you look into the last three sections, 1 to 2, 3, 4, 4 plus, you can see that the percentage of students that also answered, yes, I'm sleep deprived, was quite more than the people that said they were not sleep deprived. And it actually increased with the more AP classes you take. If you look at 4 plus, it's 65% of those students saying that they weren't sleep deprived. If you look at the very top though, students that had almost no APs or honors classes, most of them said they were not sleep deprived. There's only 20% that said they were sleep deprived. In addition, screen time was another factor that I noticed. At the bottom I have over here the question, do you use your electronic device right before going to bed? The studies have shown that if you actually do that, it keeps your brain active and you're not able to get to sleep faster. So I asked students if they did this, and they answered they did it never, they did it often, they rarely did this, or they did this sometimes. If you look at, again, the red part, which is the yes, you can see that in the often, rarely, and sometimes sections, there were a higher chance of people that said they were sleep deprived. And if you look at the people that never used their electronic devices right before bed, almost none of them said they were sleep deprived. That's saying something. So I guess the main thing is remember 8 to 10. At least for teenagers, 8 to 10 is very important. If you're making your schedule for the day, make sure that you make everything around your sleep schedule. I personally have started to do that, especially after my academic mishaps, and I encourage all of you to do the same after looking at kind of the problems of sleep deprivation. Overall, your growth as a person is stunted when you don't get enough sleep, so make sure you get those needs.